Joey Votto retires tonight. You get into a position where you think back on his career. He signs the big contract. He's really the only guy that signed the massive contract. I guess if you want to say Homer Bailey signed the massive contract, you can. But he's the one guy out of the core group of all of the Jay Bruces, Brandon Phillips, Homer Baileys, Johnny Cuetos of the world, of that era of baseball, Reds baseball, that he was the one guy that got paid, if you want to call it that. And I think that was the one thing that hung over his head from a certain portion of this fan base. Whether they are right or wrong, I just want to openly say, like, if you're somebody that gets hung up on the fact of wins and losses of what Joey Votto, team did when he was here, I just think that you're wrong. I just think you're wrong. I say that as respectfully as possible, because I do think that there are certain people that say, hey, listen, that wasn't a good contract. Joey Votto this, Joey Votto that. That takes away from, like, him the player. And my thing is, like, him the player in and of itself was special. If you want to argue about the economics of baseball and what his contract meant for this organization and all that, to me, that's a completely separate conversation, Nick. It's a completely separate conversation. But the reality is that what he put on the field on a day in and day out basis for this franchise is something that you should, at minimum, respect. At minimum, respect. And I would say, for the most part, for the vast majority of us that are fans, he's one of the handful of guys, maybe 5 or less guys, that without question is going to go down as an all-time great and make Cooperstown. I have a hard time believing that there's going to be more than maybe 2 or 3 or 4 Reds in my lifetime that are going to go into Cooperstown, and maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But he's one of them. And to just get hung up on the whole, well, they didn't win, this, that, and the next, it just seems like you're missing the point.
Yeah, the economics of baseball were a little bit different back then, but he still had to commit to Cincinnati as well. Like, that's a point that I think gets missed sometimes, is that he committed to stay in Cincinnati and, worked his tail off through a lot of really brutal seasons. Man, you think back on his career and you wish 2012 would have gone different, because just so much about him and the Reds together combined have a different feel. If a ball bounces a different way, 2020, the COVID year, if that COVID never happens, that's a full season. I think that team is built maybe even better than the 2012 team. But nonetheless, I mean, just, Joey Votto is a guy that's responsible for me being more invested in, like, things like analytics. So if you hate that, you can blame Joey Votto for that, because once I started seeing, the way that he approached the game, and I wanted to understand more about it. I wanted to understand why, he thought a walk was valuable. I didn't understand that. And so I dug more into it, and I read more and put more time and effort into that, and changed a lot and molded my entire baseball, philosophy and the way I view the game because of that. But the most impressive thing I think about Joey Votto's career is his 2021 season to me, because he was written off, and there was pretty valid reason for him being written off then. And what he did at age 37 in that year was just incredible. There's just so few players that have ever done anything like that. And I think his 2021 season, that'll probably be one of the years that I just remember the most fondly from him, just because of how incredible it was for him. And I think it took a toll on him too. And playing at that high of a level for that entire year, that it honestly probably was what was the last straw for him. Like, if he would have played maybe at a little less effort in 2021, he might have lasted a little bit longer. I honestly believe that.
Yeah, it's hard to know exactly ultimately what happens towards the end of guys' careers. I think that it was very, very, sincere, the note that he wrote that just said, frankly, he wasn't good enough anymore, right? And like, that was refreshing to read, because I felt like there are times, and certainly you have heroes and sports heroes that you just don't want to believe that they're not good enough anymore. And it felt like we were kind of getting in a weird spot as Reds fans towards the end of his career here because his contract was running up. You had to make a decision on whether you pick up the contract, and we all knew that that was absolutely absurd. Most people that had a rational mindset with what the decision was with Joey Votto, whether they were going to pick up the $20 million option or not, I mean, it was obvious that they weren't, and it was also obvious that it was about time. And it's a shame that he got hurt in spring training, of all things, like slipping on a baseball bat. Like, it stinks that that's the way that it had to end, but it's always going to end. And it's probably not going to end all that well, Nick, the vast majority of the time. I thought it ended relatively well with the Reds. I do. I personally do. They were right in the thick of it. They were playing with a fun brand of baseball. He kind of was a part of that that energetic nature of the team. And it was just refreshing to see that side of him come out towards the end of his career. And I'll also openly say this, like, I think that there's a certain portion of the fan base that I can, sympathize with or empathize. I don't know what the right word is. One of those words is the right one. I don't know which one goes hand in hand. Point is, I get where they come from with the fact that, this team never was able to get over the hump with him. And then on top of that, you find yourself in a position where, he was the only constant the entire time. So you want to pick on him. I get the idea of it. I just don't think that it's fair to Joey personally. And I've said this before, Nick. The last thing I'm going to say on Joey Votto is this. There's two ways you can go about handling your business when you get paid a lot of money. Guaranteed money, by the way. I don't know if people understand that you could just slack off and become overweight, and not care anymore, and just become a shell of yourself and still get paid. But you can do that in Major League Baseball. He not one time ever came off, at least. Again, I'm not behind closed doors. Not one time did it ever seem like he was taking days off. And I think that's the thing that I appreciated the most about Joey Votto, is that I thought that he showed up to work every day and he was doing his best. Whether or not he performed his best, that's one thing. But damn it, I not once thought to myself, Nick, I really wish Joey Votto cared more. Or I wish Joey Votto would treat his job a little more serious. And that, when you get paid a boatload of money, is a very, very, very large kind of testament, I should say, to your character. And I'm well aware of all the things that have been said or rumored this last few days about kind of that whole situation. Not one time did I ever question Joey Votto's sincerity to try to make the Reds a winning baseball team.
I think the way Joey Votto ended his career with the Reds was very well. Like, I think that it could have ended a lot uglier. There's a lot of situations, like look at Steven Strasburg, the way that ended with the Nationals, their World Series MVP, Albert Pujols with the Angels. Miguel Cabrera, up until his victory tour last year, it wasn't necessarily going swimmingly in Detroit, and he's one of the best players to ever play first base. So I don't know, the way that it ended, him getting to be a part of Ellie's first season, him getting to have some two big home runs on game number 12 of the 12-game win streak, getting to have that hit in his last at-bat. And honestly, I think it's incredible that he got thrown out in his last game. I think that's just the most Joey Votto thing ever to happen. So I don't know. I think it ended very well. I really, to the crowd that says, wow, the Reds didn't do enough for him, I don't know. I think it ended very nicely, and it could have ended ugly because a lot of other situations end ugly, and the more long-term guaranteed contracts, you're going to see a lot of more ugly situations happen. And it honestly ended very well. And a lot of it, too, is to Joey Votto's credit, because while I think me and you both agree that the Reds made the right decision to move on, it would have been very easy for Joey to be upset about that, and you wouldn't really even fault him on that. And he could have thrown shade at the Reds, and it really would have been on his side and his camp justified, but he didn't do it. He was the better man, and I think you have to respect the way that he did that.
I do think he took the high road. I'd also say he made like $200 million, so that helps. I mean, with all due respect, if anyone pays me $200 million for whatever 12 years of service, if I think that they're the world's worst people on the way out, I'm not throwing shade. I just can't do it. I mean, it's a cool day. I know some people are sad about the day. It's not sad, because this was inevitable. We've seen this coming. Last season, I was screaming to the moon. I remember, vividly on this show telling everybody that there's 8,000 people, Nick. There's 8,000 people down at the stadium, and Joey Votto has like 5 games left in a Reds uniform. And it's like nobody wanted to – I'm not saying no one wanted to listen to me, but it just seemed like you can't act like this wasn't coming is what I'm getting at. So shout out to Joey Votto. Many great memories. And I almost put out a tweet. I'm going to end in the segment on this. I almost put out a tweet that I knew would do incredible numbers. And we are in the numbers game, Nick. But I didn't do it because I just thought it was disingenuous. And I didn't want people to think that I actually believed it. But I was really close to going Barry to the clubhouse, Votto to the booth. Reds 2025.
I mean, you're the David Bell hater. You've put yourself in that corner.
I almost did it because, the algorithm on Twitter probably had me right in line with those viewpoints. But I thought to myself, as much as I would love for Barry to be out of the booth, I don't know if I can handle him being the manager. So,
Trace, will you let me indulge and read some of the best Joey Votto numbers? Our good friend,
please,
and yours, Craig Sandlin, helped compile these because I was doing a few things tonight. So let me read through a couple of these, and I think it just puts Joey Votto's career into perspective. All right, so from Sarah Langs, the great Sarah Langs, Joey Votto's peak 7-year WAR was 46.9. That ranks 9th best among first basemen all time, only trailing 7 players already in the Hall of Fame, Albert Pujols, who will be. So I think when you look at the peak, that's what really sets Joey Votto apart, is when he was his best 7-year run. And I think that's the best way to view Hall of Fame players. He was as good as anyone. Joey Votto led the league in on-base percentage 7 times. The only players to do so more: Ted Williams, Barry Bonds, Babe Ruth, and Rogers Hornsby. All right, from the Ryan Spader, this one is wild. Joey Votto could come out of retirement and go 0 for 477 and still have a higher lifetime on-base percentage than Tony Gwynn. From the USA Today, among players with 7,000 career plate appearances, Votto's 409 on-base percentage is the 9th best of the integration era. That's since 1947. And then the last one from our good friend and yours, Gordon Whitmire of the Cincinnati Enquirer. Only 4 players since 1900 have played in more games for the Reds than Votto: Rose, Concepcion, Larkin, and Bench. His 409 on-base percentage ranks 2nd, only behind Joe Morgan, and his 920 OPS second only to Frank Robinson.
Yeah, he's going to make the Hall of Fame. And if he doesn't, then I'll be shocked. And I know it's a debate. It's actually a reasonable debate if you take off the bias that you have of Joey Votto. I think it's a reasonable debate, but I think he's in. And what's weird about this whole thing that I was going to say really quickly here before we move on, I know people are asking for some rituals here. Listen, the weird thing about all this is that Votto could have struggled in 2012 postseason. He could have struggled. And the Reds could have obviously found a way to beat the Giants, and maybe they make a run in the postseason. And I'm going to throw out a hypothetical. Let's just say the Reds win a World Series, and he went 1 for 24 or whatever in that postseason. Somehow that makes his career, for some in Cincinnati, worthwhile, and it proves that he was the prototypical franchise type player, when in reality he would have done nothing to help them actually win the World Series while they were in the postseason. But since they didn't win, and it was, with all due respect, Johnny Cueto getting hurt and Mike Leake not throwing the ball well, and and Latos giving up a grand slam, as we all know, then all of a sudden now that changes someone else's career. I just, it's hard for me to follow that logic, but that logic is what some people hold on to. So that's that. Any final parting thoughts for JV19 before we head into Rids MILB?
No, Joey Votto had a 500 on base percentage in that postseason on one leg.
There you go. And I know that they're, and we're not going to get in the debate of what. Listen, let me just say this last thing. The samples, the splits are way too small for Joey Votto's post-career or postseason stuff. Okay, not for those that are like, well, he was 3 for whatever. I don't. Come on, like let's be honest here. Let's be a little fair. Okay, let's just be fair.
Well, one last real quick point is I'm very glad that Joey Votto will be going into the Hall of Fame voting the time that he will, because I think 20 years ago, I don't think Joey Votto would get in the Hall of Fame, but I think for sure that he will now. There'll be some detractors, but you know what? The good thing is, Trace, we're going to have some really good content in 5 years. No matter what happens with the Reds, would it come January 2020, what is it, 9/30?
Golly. I might be dead by that point.
We're having some off-season content, baby.
Fair enough. Glad you're thinking about that. Put it on the calendar.